The email arrived at 8:42 a.m., right as I was running a routine security check on the company's servers. The subject line was vague: "Meeting with management, urgent." By 9 a.m., I was sitting across from Richard Calloway, the company's self-important vice president of operations, in a sterile conference room lined with outdated motivational posters. Beside him sat Denise from HR, her face carefully neutral, a manila folder resting in front of her. Richard leaned back in his chair, a smug expression plastered across his face. "Alex," he said, steepling his fingers as if he were about to deliver some great wisdom. "We appreciate your contributions over the past 5 years, but the company is moving in a new direction." I blinked. "A new direction?" He sighed, as if I were a child struggling with basic comprehension. "Yes, efficiency, cost reduction, modernization. You understand." I understood perfectly. They were cutting costs, and I was the expense they'd decided to eliminate. Denise slid the manila folder across the table. "Your severance package includes 2 weeks' pay for every year of service," she said, her voice smooth, rehearsed. "We'll need your company keycard, laptop, and access credentials before you leave today." Before I leave today. No warning. No transition period. Just gone. "Wait," I said, sitting up straighter. "Who's going to manage the infrastructure? The servers? The security protocols?" Richard waved a hand dismissively. "We'll have our new IT hire handle it." I almost laughed. The company's entire digital infrastructure was built and maintained by me. Every security protocol, every encrypted system, every backup strategy, I was the one who set them up, monitored them, and kept them running. There was no documentation. Richard, in his infinite wisdom, had refused to fund a password management system, saying it was too expensive for something so basic. And now, he was firing the only person who knew how to access everything. I could have fought back, demanded an explanation, but I didn't. I just nodded, masking my fury with a calm, unreadable expression. "I see." Richard's smirk widened, as if mistaking my composure for defeat. "Good. I appreciate you taking this professionally." I stood up, taking the manila folder but not opening it. "Oh, I'm nothing if not professional." As I walked out, I felt the humiliated stares of my coworkers following me. Some looked away, uncomfortable. Others whispered behind their hands. No one spoke up. No one asked why their entire IT infrastructure was being fired on a whim. Fine. Let them figure it out on their own. I packed up my desk in precisely 15 minutes. Laptop surrendered, keycard returned. One thing I didn't return? The knowledge of every password, security protocol, and encrypted backup system this company relied on. Richard thought he'd won. He thought I was replaceable. He was about to find out just how wrong he was. I didn't cry, I didn't rant, I didn't even look back as I walked out of that glass-paneled office for the last time. But Richard, oh, he celebrated. By lunchtime, he was cracking jokes in the break room. "Honestly, I don't even know why we had an entire IT department in the first place," he said, leaning against the coffee machine, his voice loud enough for half the office to hear. "It's all just passwords and logins, right?" A few nervous chuckles followed. Some employees nodded along, desperate to stay on his good side. Others exchanged uneasy glances. They knew how much I handled, but no one was going to risk their job by saying it out loud. Richard wasn't done. At the afternoon meeting, he raised a toast to efficiency, smirking as he made a mocking reference to my departure. "Today we say goodbye to old-school inefficiencies and hello to a modern, streamlined operation." I imagined him standing there, basking in his own arrogance, completely unaware that his empire was built on a foundation he just demolished. By 4 p.m., my replacement arrived, a fresh-faced kid named Brandon, probably hired because he was cheap and good with computers. Brandon walked into my old office, clueless and eager to please, while Richard patted him on the back. "You'll have everything up and running by the end of the day, right?" Brandon nodded, full of confidence. "Of course. Just need the credentials to access the system." That's when the first crack formed in Richard's carefully constructed delusion. What do you mean, credentials? Brandon shifted uncomfortably. The admin passwords? The encryption keys? Richard paused, then waved a dismissive hand. Oh, I'd has those saved somewhere. Except it was me, and I hadn't saved anything. I had created a fortress of security protocols, firewalls, encrypted backups, and multi-factor authentication, all tied to a single administrator account, mine. And Richard, he had no access. I sat at home sipping my coffee as my phone buzzed, a text from a former coworker. So, Richard is freaking out. No one can log in. Email's down. The finance team can't access payroll. Servers are locked. You planned this, didn't you? I smiled. Richard planned this. I just let him walk right into it. Richard Calloway had always prided himself on streamlining costs, which was just corporate speak for cutting corners wherever he could. He considered himself a visionary, a leader who trimmed the fat and ran a lean, efficient operation. What he failed to realize was that, in his desperate attempt to modernize, he had just cut out the company's entire circulatory system. Because I was the system. Every network login, every server credential, every security key, all of it lived inside my head. It wasn't supposed to be that way. For years, I had requested a proper password management system, a secured, company-wide vault that would store credentials and ensure smooth transitions in case of employee departures. But every time I brought it up, Richard had laughed it off. Why would we waste money on that? It's just passwords. IT can handle it. By IT, of course, he meant me. Since the company refused to fund a system, I had done what any competent IT professional would. I kept everything locked behind tiered encryption, multi-factor authentication, and security redundancies. And since the only person who knew how to access it was me, there were no cheat codes, no forgot password, reset options, no hidden sticky notes with login details tucked under keyboards. Without my credentials, everything was locked down. They could wipe the system and start fresh, sure, but that would mean losing years of client data, financial records, contracts, proprietary software, and countless other critical company assets. Richard had no idea. I imagined him sitting at his desk, completely unaware that he had just thrown his company into a self-inflicted blackout. But he'd find out soon enough. And when he did, it would be too late. It started with a single failed login attempt, then another and another. By 10 a.m., the first urgent email hit Richard's inbox, except he didn't actually see it because, well, email was down. Brandon, the brand new IT hire, was already sweating. He had been handed a company laptop, a list of employees to onboard, and a login screen that refused to let him in. "Sir?" he said hesitantly, poking his head into Richard's office. "I can't access the system." Richard barely looked up from his morning coffee, still riding the high of his victory. "Just reset the password." Brandon shifted uncomfortably. I don't have admin access." That got Richard's attention. He frowned, setting his cup down. "What do you mean you don't have admin access? IT should have the credentials on file." Brandon swallowed. It was Alex. For the first time since my departure, a flicker of doubt crossed Richard's face. He pulled up his computer, tried logging into his own executive dashboard. Access denied. His brow furrowed. "Well, what about payroll? The finance team can process payments, right?" Brandon hesitated. No one in finance can log in either. The payroll software is on the same locked server." Richard's face paled. That's when his desk phone rang. He picked up, irritation creeping into his voice. "What?" It was Karen from accounting. "Richard, we have a serious problem. The payroll system is completely inaccessible. None of our employees have been paid yet, and I'm getting calls from the bank asking why transactions aren't going through." Just fix it," Richard snapped, rubbing his temple. "We can't," Karen said. "Alex was the only one who had access to the payroll encryption keys. We need those passwords." Richard was silent. Karen hesitated before adding, "Should we, Call Alex? Richard clenched his jaw. Absolutely not. 10:45 a.m. The calls were pouring in now. Marketing couldn't access their project management files. HR couldn't onboard new hires. The legal team couldn't pull up contracts. Sales had no way to generate invoices. By 11:30 a.m., the CEO had been notified. By noon, the company was in full-scale panic mode. And Richard was finally realizing that he had made the worst mistake of his career. Because the only person who could fix this had just walked out the door. By 1 p.m., the company was in complete chaos. Phones rang off the hook. Employees scrambled to regain access to their work accounts, locked out by the very systems they depended on. "Why isn't this working?" Someone in sales shouted. "I can't access client files," another voice from the marketing team added. At first, Richard insisted it was just a minor inconvenience, a temporary glitch, nothing Brandon couldn't handle. But by 2 p.m., his confidence had eroded into full-scale panic. The finance team was flooded with angry calls from vendors, suppliers, and clients who had not received payments. The company's automated invoicing system was inaccessible, and banks were flagging missing transactions. Payroll was still locked, which meant hundreds of employees would not receive their paychecks, a situation that could explode into a legal nightmare if it wasn't resolved immediately. "Just override the system," Richard barked at Brandon. I can't," Brandon stammered. His hands trembled as he typed frantically on the keyboard. "Everything is locked behind multi-layer encryption, two-factor authentication, and admin-level security keys." Richard's face twisted. "Then reset it." Brandon swallowed. "I can't reset anything without admin clearance." That's when it finally sank in. Alex had built the system to be airtight. And now, the only person who could fix this wasn't here anymore. Richard felt the weight of it settle into his chest, heavy and suffocating. The company was paralyzed. Clients were threatening to walk away. Suppliers were pulling contracts. Employees were panicking over missing wages. And worst of all, the board of directors had just been informed. By 3 p.m., Richard was sweating through his overpriced dress shirt. He had one option left. He grabbed his phone, his fingers trembling as he scrolled through his contacts, and then reluctantly, he dialed Alex's number. I was halfway through a cappuccino at my favorite cafe when my phone buzzed. Richard Calloway. I took my time, let it ring a few times before answering. "Alex!" Richard's voice came through tight and controlled, but I could hear the underlying desperation. "We need to talk." I took a leisurely sip of my coffee. "Oh? I thought you were moving in a new direction." A pause, a sharp breath. "Look, there's an issue with the system, a miscommunication, I'm sure, but we need the admin credentials to regain access." I smiled to myself. There it was. The first crack in his arrogance. "Sounds like an IT problem," I said, feigning indifference. "Isn't that what you hired Brandon for?" Silence, then, clipped and frustrated, "He can't get in." I let that hang in the air for a moment, tapping my cup thoughtfully. That's interesting." Richard lost his patience. "Damn it, Alex, this isn't funny. The company is hemorrhaging money. Employees aren't getting paid, and I have clients threatening legal action." "Wow, that sounds serious," I said lightly, almost like someone fired their entire IT department without a transition plan. A long, slow exhale came from the other end. He was trying to rein in his temper now. "Look," Richard said, switching tactics, "I know we had our differences, but you're a professional, right? You wouldn't just sit back and let the company crash." I nearly laughed. The same man who mocked me in front of the entire office was now begging me to save him. "You're right," I said, pausing for effect. "I am a professional, but here's the thing. I don't work for you anymore." Silence. Then Richard tried guilt-tripping me. "Alex, don't be petty. Think about your former co-workers. They need this company to stay afloat." Oh, now he cared about them? "I do think about them," I said. "That's why I advised you for years to invest in a password management system. You ignored me. That was your mistake, not mine." Richard's voice tightened. "If you don't give me those passwords, Alex, I cut him off. "You'll what? Fire me again?" The silence that followed was delicious. I let him sit in it, stew in it. Then calmly, I said, "Good luck, Richard. You're going to need it." And with that, I hung up. Richard Calloway had spent years cultivating an image of control, the confident executive, the smooth-talking leader who always had a plan. By 4 p.m., that image was in freefall. The company's biggest clients were livid. "We have $500,000 tied up in transactions we can't access," one furious executive from a major supplier barked over the phone. "We sent the invoices days ago. Why the hell hasn't your system processed them?" Another client, one of their largest contracts, was on the verge of pulling out. "If you can't guarantee secure access to our data, we'll take our business elsewhere." Richard, still gripping his phone, forced a chuckle. "This is just a minor IT issue, I assure you. Everything will be resolved by the end of the day." Except it wouldn't, because while Brandon frantically typed away in the server room, nothing was working. Every attempt to reset the system was met with wall after wall of locked-out credentials. This doesn't make sense," Brandon muttered, his hands shaking as he tried yet another override. "I should be able to reset at least some of these, but the multi-layer encryption, it's like trying to break into Fort Knox." "That's because Alex built it that way." The words came from Karen in accounting, who had been standing in the doorway watching the chaos unfold. Brandon looked up, stricken. I thought they'd just, I don't know, use standard admin passwords." Karen snorted. "You mean the ones Richard refused to invest in documenting?" Brandon slumped back in his chair, defeated. "There's no way around this without Alex." At 6 p.m., the CEO and the board of directors were assembled on a crisis call. "This is unacceptable," one of the board members snapped. "Calloway, you assured us this transition would be seamless." Richard swallowed hard. "We're handling it." A board member cut him off. "You fired the only person who could fix this without a backup plan. Now, because of you, we're bleeding money, losing clients, and facing a possible lawsuit for unpaid salaries. Explain yourself." For the first time in his career, Richard had no answer. By the next morning, the story had gone viral. An anonymous employee, probably one of the many infuriated staff members, had leaked the situation to the media. The headline on one of the industry's biggest news sites read, "Tech firm in freefall after firing, key IT staff now locked out of their own system." Richard's worst nightmare had just begun. The article exposed everything: the sudden termination, the failure to document system credentials, and the absolute incompetence of the leadership team. By noon, the company was trending on social media. IT Gate, Calloway Crisis, Fire your IT, see what happens. Employees, emboldened by the chaos, began airing their grievances online. One posted a screenshot of an old email from Richard rejecting the request for a proper password management system. "Cost-saving genius, folks. Now we can't even access our own payroll. Brilliant leadership." Another, a former employee, shared their experience working under Richard. "Not surprised. This company treated IT like an afterthought for years. Now they're paying the price, literally." Clients and competitors took notice. One rival company even posted, "Need a new tech partner? We guarantee access to your own system. Call us." Within 24 hours, the company had lost 3 major clients. By the end of the day, recruiters from competing firms were reaching out to employees, offering better salaries and stable leadership. And Richard sat at his desk, staring at his phone, his email, and his imploding career. The CEO had given him an ultimatum: fix this. Now, there was only one solution left, and it was the last thing Richard wanted to do. He had to call Alex, and this time, he wouldn't be negotiating from a position of power. The knock on my door came at 8 p.m. sharp. I wasn't surprised. I had been expecting Richard Calloway to come crawling back, but I thought it would take at least another day or two of watching his empire burn before he swallowed his pride. I took my time answering. When I finally opened the door, Richard stood on my front porch looking wrecked. His usual smug confidence was gone, replaced by the frazzled, hollow-eyed exhaustion of a man whose entire world was crumbling around him. "Alex," he said, forcing a tight smile, "I think we need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Bold of you to assume I'd have any interest in that. His jaw tightened, but he managed to keep his forced politeness intact. "Look, I know things ended on bad terms, but I'm willing to let bygones be bygones. The company needs you." I stared at him for a beat. Then, I laughed. Richard flinched, like he hadn't expected that reaction. "Oh, no," I said, still chuckling. "You're not willing to let bygones be bygones. You're desperate because you lit your own company on fire, and now you're looking for someone to put it out." His face reddened. "That's not..." I cut him off. "Let me guess. Brandon failed. The finance team is screaming. The board is threatening you. Did I miss anything?" Richard exhaled sharply, clearly fighting the urge to snap. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a check. "Here," he said, thrusting it toward me. "A consulting fee. Just come back and fix this." I took the check, glanced at the amount. Then I laughed again. "Richard," I said, shaking my head, "this is less than what I made in a month at your company. Try again." His nostrils flared. "I'm offering you a chance to make things right." That did it. I squared my shoulders, stepping forward until I was close enough for him to feel just how much power he didn't have anymore. "I don't need to make anything right," I said, voice calm but cold. "You do." For a second, I thought he might actually beg, but his ego won out. Richard snatched the check back, stuffing it into his pocket. "Fine," he snapped. "We'll see how long you enjoy this little victory." Then he stormed off. I closed the door behind him, smiling. "Oh, Richard, you still don't get it. This wasn't just a little victory. This was checkmate." By 9 a.m. the next morning, the board of directors had convened an emergency meeting. The agenda? Richard Calloway's complete and utter failure. Sitting at the long glass conference table, Richard felt the heat of every pair of eyes drilling into him. "We've reviewed the situation," one of the senior board members said, his tone dangerously measured, "and what we've found is troubling." Another board member folded her hands. "You fired the only IT professional with full system access without securing documentation?" Richard swallowed. "It wasn't..." "You rejected multiple proposals for a secure password management system to cut costs?" "Technically..." "You publicly mocked the termination of the one person who could have prevented this catastrophe?" Silence. The CEO, a usually reserved and calculating man, leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what this has cost us?" he asked, his voice low but deadly. 3 major contracts lost. A stock drop of 15% in a single day. Employees leaving. And now, our competitors are circling like vultures. Richard sat there, sweat beading at his temple, as the room closed in around him. "We have only one option," the CEO continued. "We need Alex back." Richard flinched at the words. "That's..." "And you," the CEO interrupted, "are going to personally apologize and ask them to return." The humiliation rolled through him like a slow-moving train wreck. "No," Richard said through clenched teeth. There has to be another way." One of the board members adjusted his glasses. "You had another way, Richard. You chose to fire your IT manager without a backup plan. Now you fix it." Richard was cornered. He could either bend his pride and beg Alex to return, or he could refuse and watch the company implode completely. With a tight jaw and dead eyes, he reached for his phone. Fine, he'd make the damn call. Richard hated that he had to do this. He had burned every bridge with Alex, made a spectacle of their termination, and now he was sitting in a quiet corner of a high-end cafe, waiting like a beggar for them to arrive. When I walked in, I took my time, ordered a coffee, made Richard sit there, stewing in his own misery while I deliberately ignored his presence for a solid 2 minutes. Finally, I sat across from him, leaning back like I had all the time in the world. "Richard," I said, nodding in greeting. He barely hid his scowl. "Alex!" There was no small talk, no fake pleasantries, just business. "So," I said, stirring my coffee, "you need me back." Richard clenched his jaw. "We need your assistance in restoring the company's systems." "Uh-huh." I took a slow sip. "And what exactly are you offering?" Richard exhaled sharply, like he was physically forcing himself to comply. "Your old job back. Same salary." I laughed. Actually, laughed. "Richard, you must be kidding." His nostrils flared, but he kept his composure. "Fine, a raise." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. "Try again." His fingers curled into fists. "What do you want?" I had been waiting for that question. I pulled out a neatly folded document from my bag and slid it across the table. "My terms." Richard hesitated before unfolding it. As his eyes skimmed the contents, his face darkened. "Consulting contract, not employment. I would not be rejoining the company. I would work on my terms, remotely, and at my own discretion. Triple my original salary, non-negotiable. If you want my expertise, you pay for it. Public apology. A company-wide email from Richard himself, acknowledging my previous contributions and admitting he made a mistake. Mandatory IT infrastructure investment. No more cost cutting. The company would fund a secure password management system, upgrade their cybersecurity, and implement a disaster recovery plan. I watched as Richard's face twisted in barely concealed rage. "You're serious," he muttered. I tilted my head. "No, Richard. I just wasted my afternoon coming here for fun." His hands shook slightly as he folded the paper back up. "This is extortion." I smiled. "Number. This is what happens when you don't value your employees." He swallowed. His entire career was hanging in the balance. He had no choice. "Fine," he gritted out. "You'll have the contract by tomorrow." "And the apology?" I raised an eyebrow. Richard looked like he wanted to throw something, but in the end he nodded. I finished my coffee and stood. "Pleasure doing business with you." As I walked out of the cafe, I didn't look back. I had won. By Monday morning, the company was buzzing. The rumors were everywhere. Alex is coming back, but not as an employee. At exactly 10 a.m., my inbox pinged, a company-wide email from Richard Calloway himself. I clicked it. Subject: an important announcement. "Dear team, I would like to acknowledge that in recent weeks, our company has faced unexpected IT-related challenges that have caused disruptions to our operations. In light of these challenges, I want to publicly recognize Alex Carter's past contributions and admit that their departure was mishandled. To ensure the swift restoration of our systems and to strengthen our infrastructure moving forward, we have contracted Alex as an independent consultant to assist in resolving these issues. Their expertise has always been invaluable to our company, and we look forward to working with them again. Thank you for your patience and understanding." Richard Calloway. I leaned back in my chair, grinning. The same man who had fired me and mocked me in front of the entire office had just been forced to eat his words. But the real fun came when I logged into my video call with the company's leadership. A room full of executives, including Richard, all sitting stiffly, waiting for me to speak. I let the silence drag for a few seconds. Then I smiled. "Let's begin." Over the next 2 hours, I laid out a comprehensive plan for restoring their systems. I walked them through every security layer I had built, every protocol that had to be reinstated, every upgrade they would now be paying for. And the best part? I did it without Richard being able to say a damn thing. Every time he tried to interject, the CEO cut him off. "Alex is leading this project, Calloway," he said curtly. "Let them speak." By the end of the meeting, Richard's face was red with frustration. And I was getting paid triple my previous salary to sit back, run the show, and watch Richard silently suffer through every second of it. When I logged off the call, I stretched, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The employees, they were cheering my return. Richard, he was powerless. And me? I had everything I wanted, and more. Richard Calloway had spent years building his career, climbing the corporate ladder through a mix of charm, manipulation, and cutting corners wherever he could. Now it was all falling apart. At the next board meeting, the CEO didn't even try to soften the blow. After reviewing the full scope of this disaster, he announced, "It's clear that this company cannot afford another mistake like this. Effective immediately, Richard Calloway is being removed as Vice President of Operations." A tense silence followed. Richard sat there, his face pale, hands gripping the edge of the table. "You can't be serious," he said, forcing a laugh. One of the board members gave him a cold stare. "We are. You cost this company millions. Clients walked out the door because of you, and now you have no credibility left." His jaw clenched. "I can fix this." The CEO leaned forward. "We already did. We brought Alex back, something you refused to do until it was too late, and they're handling it more efficiently than you ever could." The words landed like a hammer. I built this company," Richard stammered. "No," the CEO said, shaking his head. "Alex built it. You just burned it down." By the end of the meeting, Richard had lost his title, his executive privileges, and his stock options. He was offered a lesser role, a figurehead position with no real decision-making power, a corporate death sentence. But the real final blow? As I sat in the IT office, now under direct control of the board, not Richard, I quietly retired the last piece of security infrastructure he had access to. The old executive credentials? Deleted. His administrative rights? Revoked. The last power he had over the company's systems? Gone. By the time he realized it, there was nothing left to fight for. And I made sure of one thing: Richard Calloway would never be able to sabotage anyone's career ever again. 1 year later, I had built something even bigger. After my well-publicized win over Richard's disaster, I became a highly sought-after cybersecurity consultant. Corporations reached out. Industry leaders wanted me to audit their systems, build stronger security protocols, prevent another Calloway incident. So I launched my own IT consulting firm. Clients flooded in. Some were big names, some were emerging startups. But the real irony, many of them were Richard's former partners, the same executives and companies he had spent years trying to impress. They now trusted me more than him. And then, one morning, I received an application for an open IT coordinator position from Richard Calloway. I actually laughed out loud. His email was stripped of arrogance, full of forced humility. He wrote about seeking new opportunities and how he had reevaluated his approach to leadership. He was asking for a job at my firm. I stared at the email for a moment, then slowly typed my reply. "Richard, thank you for your interest. However, at this time, we are looking for candidates who understand the importance of valuing their employees. Best of luck in your search." And with that, I hit send. Richard had spent years underestimating me, taking credit for my work and cutting corners. Now, I had everything, and he had nothing. The last time I had seen Richard Calloway, he was desperate, humiliated, and clawing at whatever scraps of power he had left. Now, he was just another forgotten name in the industry. It was a high-profile tech networking event, filled with industry leaders, CEOs, and executives looking for new partnerships and talent. I had been invited as a guest speaker, my consulting firm now recognized as one of the most sought-after cybersecurity firms in the market. My name carried weight, which is probably why Richard approached me. He looked different, a little thinner, a little grayer, a lot less confident. He was wearing a suit that didn't quite fit him right, the kind of cheap, off-the-rack purchase that screamed, "I lost my executive salary." He stopped in front of me, awkward, shifting from foot to foot. "Alex," he said, forcing a smile, I heard about your firm. You've really built something impressive." I sipped my drink, waiting. I just wanted to say. He hesitated, his ego visibly warring with his situation. "You did good. And, no hard feelings, right?" Oh, this was rich. Richard had spent years mocking me, undervaluing me, treating me as disposable. He had literally fired me, laughed about it, then begged me to fix his mistakes. And now he was standing in front of me hoping for, what? Forgiveness, a favor, a lifeline. I smiled, not cruel, not vindictive, just calm, victorious. "Good luck, Richard," I said, setting my drink down. "You're going to need it." And with that, I turned and walked away, leaving him standing there, just another washed-up executive in a sea of people who had already moved on. As I made my way across the event floor, a well-known CEO flagged me down, eager to discuss a new security contract for their company. I didn't even glance back at Richard. I had already won, every possible way. Want to hear more of this? Then click on the video on the right-hand side, which is even crazier.